Hello guys, welcome back. Today we are going to talk more about annotations. In last session we have seen how to install TestNG and also the advantages of using TestNG. So whenever we talk about framework in our future classes, the concept of TestNG is very important. So you have to know more about annotations and end to end. It's good to have end to end knowledge of TestNG. So for that we'll discuss in today's session what annotations are and what are the basic or common annotations that you use. So annotations are nothing but what they actually tell the program how to run. The order of execution will be decided by the annotations that you give. So in real time, when you have hundreds and hundreds of test cases, you should have, like, as a person who is executing those test cases, you should have control over the order of execution. So for that we have test annotations in readily available that TestNG gave us. So we'll see what they are and how they'll be used. So I'm going to Eclipse, and today's testing, let's do it on spicejet.com. So I create a new Java project for this, and I'll call it as, let's spice it up a bit today, and I call it as my spice project, and then click on next and say finish. I have my project here, and now I create a package. So if you check this spicejet.com, you have a tab or a module which is called book, and under this book you have flights, hotels and holiday packages. So it clearly says that you can book flight or a hotel or holiday package. So usually what I do is I categorize, or I structure my packages in such a way that I put all the similar functionalities in one package. So some of them will do in such a way that under book you have flights, so they'll create a package for flights and put all the test cases under that package for flight. So whatever you see here will go under this package. So similarly you can have hotels and holiday packages as all the different packages in your project. So I choose based on the functionality. So you should discuss with your project members like how they follow. So, and whatever way is convenient for you, you can follow that. So today I'm going to create a package for bookings, and in this package I call different classes. First class is book a flight, and then I have one more class for booking a hotel, and the other one is for holiday package. Book holiday package. So though I might not use all the three classes here in this session, but this is the way how I structure my packages and the classes. So book a flight, in this what happens is, like, before actually writing my test cases, I'll import the TestNG library, because as we discussed, we'll be using TestNG in this, and I write TestNG tests here. So click on build path and say add libraries, select TestNG and click next, finish. Once I add this, I come here and write my tests. We already discussed in the last session, like in TestNG, each method is called a test case. So every method you write is nothing but your test case. So write public void method name, book flight, and here under this I have round trip and one way. So I click on I write test cases for round trip first. Round trip test case 1. This is my first method. So it's erroring out, it's asking me to import TestNG. I did now. So I wrote my first test case. If you see here, a naming convention, I followed a proper naming convention here, and book flight So book flight, and under that I'm writing a test case for round trip, and then test case 1. Test case 1 might be from or to validate whatever the drop downs that I have. So this, if you follow proper naming conventions, it is very easy for any new member to understand the code, or there are number of advantages. Even when you are doing manual testing, you will always have a proper naming convention. So it is always recommended to discuss with your project team members. You might have a proper documentation of how the naming convention should be. So just copy that and follow that. In the same way, I'm creating the one more test for book flight, and I call it test case 2. Then I have two more for I have test case 2, and then I have I'll remove this and I'll give one way. I also have an option for one way, right? So I click one way, test case number 3, and then I'll create one more test case for one way, which is test case number 4. So now I have altogether 4 test cases, 2 for round trip and 2 for one way. So actual code, like whatever you're validating, for example, if you're validating this drop down, that code goes here. But for now, I'm just printing a single statement for this particular test case. So I say system.out.println, and I just say test case 1. Okay, in the same way, this is test case number 2. Test case number 3 and 4. So if you run your program, you see that all the 4 test cases will be executed. The output will be 1, 2, 3. Test case 1, test case 2, 3 and 4. So yes, here is the output. So you see, don't worry about the order as how you see, because they always go by the alphabetical order. So all the test cases that are run here will be displayed based on the way you alphabetically, like R comes first, and like O comes next, so the order will be in that way. So that's the reason 3 and 4 got, like O got executed first, like, and then the other two came next, 1 and 2. So just don't worry about that. But the output is like test case 1, 2, 3 and 4. All the 4 got displayed. Now we have something here called before test and after test annotations. So what do they do is, before test is nothing but you're telling that particular test to run before any other test in your program. So just straightforward, guys. Let's write a method before test, and then public void, define it before test case 1. So you have to import this particular annotation here. I did. Now I say system, simple statement. So before test, what did I say? Like this will be run before any other test in your program. So uh, this should be first. Okay, and then your actual test will run. So doesn't matter where it is. So if I can just for understanding, I'll cut this and paste in middle. So when, even if now if you run it first, before test will be executed, and you should see that this should be first, will be your first line, followed by all the other tests. So in practically, like in real time, when do you think this will be useful? So whenever you're testing and when you have number of tests, sometimes it so happens that before you're testing, you need to clear some data manually, or you need to clear, not exactly manually, but you know that you need to clear up some data before your actual test begins. So those things, those snippets, you will capture and put those under before test method. So when what you are saying is, before my test run, make sure you clear everything, and then your actual test will trigger. So there are like advantages. So we will identify those modules which you think are necessary for you to run before your actual test will start its execution and put those under before test. So in the same way, you have something called after test. So I'll just copy the same thing. That's again a different annotation. So add it here and say after test, and method name will be after test case number 1. This should be last. Okay, this like after test again is nothing. You have to import this after test, as the name says. You, after all your tests are run, you should make sure that this particular test case is run. So what will you include here is generally clearing the cache, or some common functionalities that you want to run after all the entire tests are completed in this particular program. So when you run, you should make sure that you see this should be first, will be the first line, followed by all the tests 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the last after test will be executed. So let's run this program and see what's the output is. Yeah. If you see, this should be first, is the first statement, which means that before test annotation got executed first, followed by all the tests, and then this should be last after test annotation is executed. So basically, based on your requirement, you'll add these tests in your program. Same way, you have something called before method and after method. So before method is nothing but it will run, method is nothing but a test case. So you have 4 test cases here in this particular example that we are talking about, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So if you want a particular code to be run before every test case, that's when you add it with the annotation before method. So let's see how this works practically. I'll add before method annotation here, and then I'll define it public void before method test case 1, and now I will just print a statement which says that this code will run before every test case. So there will be there will be some snippet of code which you would like to run before every test case, maybe initiating some variables, or maybe some initiating a URL or whatever based on your requirement. So those things you will add under this before method. So what happens is, here we have four test cases. So before every test case, this particular method will execute and this line will be printed for in this example. So let's execute this and see how it goes. Before method, yep. If you see, this should be first, is your previous example which we saw before test is executed. Now test case 3, 4, 1, and 2. Before every test case, what did you find, guys? This line is printed which says this code will be run before every test case. So before method is nothing but it executes before every single test case in your entire program. So if you have like 50 test cases defined, this, and if you include this before method for all the 50 test cases, this before method will be executed. So if you really want something which needs to be run for every test case, you will add that particular part of the code to your before method. So the same thing goes with after method also. So just copy paste this, and you will add that part of code which you want to run after every test. So just instead of before, replace it after method. Test case. So this code will be run after every test case. Add the annotation for this and then run this. Okay, so if you see, before test first line got printed, and this is the before method that we added. So this line is printed, test case will be executed, and then after method. So after method is same as before. So after every test case, you will see after method is getting executed and printing this line. So in this case, you will see like before and after, in between your actual test case will be run. So these are like the common annotations that we use. Along with this, we also have before class and after class. So you can just add a part of the code that you want to be executed, and before actually test begins, this will run, like before class and after class, and you will see that the particular code is getting executed. There is one more annotation called before suite and after suite. So I'm going to discuss that when we are talking about TestNG XML, maybe in the next session. So for now, I am not discussing that, but just keep in mind that we have before suite and after suite to be discussed later on. But otherwise, these are the basic annotations that we have. Along with these annotations, also provide few helper attributes. So you can add few attributes to these annotations and make it like more useful. So based on the common functionalities and based on the common operations that a QA engineer will perform, the TestNG team came up with some attributes. So let's discuss the first one, which says depends on methods. So for example, I have this test which says round trip test case 2. So I have some dependency of this on this test case. So in real time also we have dependencies, right? For example, maybe a job needs to be run for you to execute a particular test case. So for all such things, you will add something called after the annotation test. You should add depends on methods equal to, so give the method name here. For example, you want this test case, enclose this in brackets and pass it here. So you want this test case 2 to be dependent on test case 1. So it makes sure that test case 1 is run before the test 2 is actually started. So let's run and see the order here. Oh, it's erroring out. So I did some mistake here. So no problem. Errors are always good. Let's see where I did wrong. Book flight round trip depends on non-existent method round trip test case 1. So is this not? Oh, I'm so sorry. So I have to select the entire method name. I skipped the book flight, so it's not able to find out what the method name which says round trip test case 1. So give the proper name, and now this should resolve. Now this should run. So click on run. Okay. So if you see, the test case 1 is executed and completed successfully, and that's when the test case 2 has been triggered. So the same way, like it's always good, like when you have two or more dependencies, you can just give a comma and add all the dependencies. So in real time, most of the times we definitely have the dependencies. So for one test case to be executed, we'll have to either wait or see that the other test case is completed. So in that places, like you can just add this particular attribute and make sure the other test cases, like the prerequisite test cases, are all run before you trigger the actual test case. So in the same way, there is one more attribute called enabled. So when we define test cases like this, it means that every test case will be executed. Sometimes there you will already know that there is some issue, maybe some known prod issue or whatever, or maybe some known issue which you have already reported to your developer, and you know that he's working on that. So in that case, what you can do is Definitely not known prod issue. I'm taking it back. The prod issues should not actually exist when you're doing thorough testing. So production stability is our main focus as QA engineers. Keep that in mind. So whenever you're testing and you have reported a bug to your developer when he is working, you don't want to waste your time, and you know that this particular test is going to fail. For example, this particular test which says round trip test case 1. Okay, or let's write one more test here. Okay, or let's pick this particular test which says one way test case number 4. So you know that this particular test is failing. So you've already reported this to your developer and you don't want this to run now. So in the before run, we see that test case 4 has run. So if you want to make it disabled, you have a attribute called enabled is equal to make it false. What is that error? I'm so sorry. Enabled is equal to false. So whenever you say enabled is equal to false, it means that you are asking your program not to run this particular test case. So it still exists here, but out of 100 test cases, maybe 2 or 3 that they have issues, and that they are known issues which are being worked on by development team. So you can just make it as false, and then if you run this program, this particular test case should not run. So let's see the output. You see test case number 1, 3 and 2, and that's it. Last after test is executed. So you see that test case number 4 is not executed. So these helper attributes will make your life more easy. So annotations I would suggest you practice more like whatever we have discussed, like after test before test, and after method before method. You can also try after and before class, and these will be very helpful in your real time when you're actually working on frameworks to structure your test cases. The execution order will be defined. So if you have any questions, please feel free to comment, and I'll reply to you as soon as possible. In our next session, let us learn about TestNG XML, and how we trigger test cases from our XML file rather than manually doing it from here. Happy coding, guys. Let's talk in our next session. Enjoy. Bye.